If you do not want to be recorded, please don't speak or turn on your video. I think we'll be, hopefully, let's see, stop recording. All right, there we go. All righty. So good afternoon. This is David Perlman, and with me we have Stephanie
Cox?
Stevens and
Oh,
Ann.
sorry. I thought I was getting introduced. Sorry.
Go ahead,
Cox.
Heather.
Please.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Heather Cox, Stephanie Stevens. We go together like peanut butter and jelly. We're here too.
Awesome. And so really appreciate our friends from Seton Hall. I'll let them introduce themselves, but what a great story in terms of what they're doing with learning and automation. So without further ado, it's off to you. I think, Paul, you're starting, or Steve, and feel free to keep the video on.
CIO. I'll just turn it over to Paul and Matt at this point.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Fisher, the Associate Chief Information Officer at Seton Hall. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Stevenson, Executive Director for Architecture and Infrastructure at Seton Hall.
So I have to say, I totally understand why we only record the second half of this meeting now. I didn't quite understand that until experiencing the first 30 minutes. So I appreciate all the energy and the laughs that sort of made my afternoon after a trying day. We started our semester yesterday, and so goes that with all of the complications of the things that we're sort of about to talk about. So, just very quickly for those on the call that don't know who Seton Hall is, we're in northern New Jersey. We're located 15 miles outside of New York City, which gives us a little bit of the city feel and a little bit of the suburban feel. We're a private Catholic institution. We have about 11,000 students split almost evenly between undergrad and grad. We have about 500 full-time faculty, about 1,000 full-time employees, 12 online degree programs. At least that's what we consider official. At this point, I think every degree program is somewhat online. And one of the very unique things about our campus, it wasn't always a very unique thing. It's much more unique thing now, but I think in the future won't be very unique going forward after the experience in the pandemic, as we are a one-to-one computing campus. So we give all of our undergraduate students a computer when they get here as a freshman, and I'm sure everybody on the call will be happy to know it's a PC. And always has been. So just quickly to get through sort of the context before I turn it over to Matt and get to the real technical kinds of things. Like everybody else, we were forced to shut down the on-prem campus in March and go all remote. We have a pretty rich history of using technology when it comes to teaching and learning at the university, but there's always those varying degrees of who knows how to do what. We had 2 days to prepare the faculty for 100% synchronous remote learning, and I think we did a really good job. We had about 75% of the faculty come through some kind of training or view an on-demand training session in those 2 days, and I think we did pretty well for what we had to do in the spring. Of course, in the spring we hit the same financial challenges that all campuses were hitting at the same time. We had refunds for room and board, which cost the university a whole lot of money. And first and foremost on our minds was, what were we going to do for summer? And initially talking about we have students that need to graduate, and we don't want to hold them back from graduating. And then of course we have reality with if summer doesn't hit the same kind of revenue projections as it normally does, what does that mean for the campus after spending millions of dollars on refunds for room and board? And then ultimately, what are we going to do in the fall if this is still our scenario? In the middle of March, everybody thought we were going home for 2 weeks. Most of our staff from the IT perspective hasn't been back since March 16th. So that was certainly a fantasy that we were living through. But ultimately, mostly luck and a little bit of vision sort of pulled us through. My team is the teaching and learning team. Matt's team is the infrastructure team. So it's sort of our job to figure out how we want to use it, and then it's Matt's team's job to figure out how we can implement what we're going to do. So Teams was still relatively new to the campus, but we did have a little bit of vision and had just finished our our pilot from the summer and the fall using school data sync to get all courses into Teams as a course, the same way we do our learning management system. So we had a fair amount of faculty members who were introduced to Teams already and using it a little bit. And that came about because we had a couple of really bad winters and people were tired of losing class time. So Teams was really the solution to no more snow days, much to the chagrin of our students. So one of the other problems, of course, we were facing at the time that this all launched was the Zoom versus Teams challenge, and we certainly faced that a little bit today, but not nearly as much as we did in March. And this is the time where I really want to shout out to my colleagues at Microsoft for really listening to all of the universities that wanted to leverage Teams, something that we were already paying for in our Office 365 environment, and something that can certainly do the job without spending additional resources that were very, very quickly going away for us. So from our perspective, between March and August, Microsoft really rallied and brought the tool set to feature parity, so that there's still pockets of people who are fighting that fight, but I believe we've won the battle at this point. Really the major challenge for the fall semester was how are we going to do what we were known for, and that's small classroom sizes, small or low faculty to student ratios, and we don't have a whole lot of large rooms on the campus. So when the social distancing requirements came in, we were really presented with a big challenge, and we didn't realize what we were going to do. But as we very quickly did the study, we decided on this thing that we call Hyflex now. We were lucky that our leadership gave us an audience in front of our board very quickly in April, and we got funding to do some technological enhancements that weren't even defined yet. So I think, again, between a little bit of vision and a whole lot of luck, we were able to have a very successful fall semester. So I'll just take us through what that strategy was. So we call this thing Hyflex. It's certainly a buzzword now, if it wasn't before, all over higher education. But for those of you who may not know, it's some students are in seat watching the professor in person, while other students are online watching the professor through Teams. And then typically that scenario will reverse. Those students who were in seat today will be online at the next class session, while those that were online today would come in person on the next class session, giving everybody the opportunity, if they wanted it, an in-seat, in-person experience. And that was very much in response to a survey that we did to our students. Students and certainly their parents were very vocal about saying we're paying for an in-person experience. If I wanted online education, I would have gone to Phoenix. So we are, that our Hyflex strategy was specifically in response to what our students' desires were. Of course, those desires and those habits didn't always line up. As we got into the later months of the fall semester, many of our students who had chosen to be Hyflex, and meaning somewhat in person, were 100% virtual for lots of different reasons. So as we were leveraging our remote strategy, which was Teams, to do synchronous learning remotely, we came up with a strategy that we could actually handle to do Teams in the classroom. We have about, I would say, 175 classrooms across 3 campuses at the university. And what we wanted to do was make it as easy as possible for a faculty member to walk in the room, click a button, start their class meeting, and whether or not they were using a laptop or any other kind of technology, they could actually facilitate a class. So there's many classes where they're really discussant sessions, and they're talking through topics that they either read or watched a lecture on, in the mode of sort of flipping the classroom. So our strategy was to install permanent web conferencing equipment in as many classrooms as we could across across the 3 campuses. We ultimately got to about 50% of our classrooms have permanent web conferencing Teams room systems in them right now. So every one of our classrooms had an existing display and speakers in it. So we were really just looking at adding the brains of a team system in the back. We chose a Crestron panel because Crestron is our is the technology we use across all 3 campuses to do room control anyway. So the Crestron Teams room systems was what we chose. And then the other addition obviously was a camera. Not every classroom had a camera in there. So knowing that we were going to run up against hardware constraints and labor constraints with our partners to actually install these systems, we contracted very early in April and wound up meeting, I would say, 95% of the install on time before we started the fall semester. The remainder of our classrooms were going to sort of be web conferencing agnostic. So it was a portable webcam like I'm using today that's sitting on top of my monitor on a tripod. And the faculty member would have to go through a little bit more gyrations to connect the camera to their laptop, the system in the room to their laptop to use the speakers and the display, and then we're using their laptop microphone as the microphone in the room. So that was sort of our strategy, and that was one challenge to get it all done, and we managed to get that all in place and in time. Here's just an example of how we communicated this to the faculty. So we have three rooms on campus as we described them. A Teams Hyflex room, which meant it had a Teams panel in it. So it had, and we added a second display in as many of those rooms as we could. This way, the faculty member who was lecturing at the front would be able to see the distance students on the second screen, while the students in class would see the course content that was being shared on the main display in the room, which was also being shared over Teams. In many instances, we added 4 ceiling mics and speakers in some cases. So, all of our classrooms again had a display, but adding the Teams panel and a camera and microphones throughout the room is what really made for the experience that really allows the student to feel like they're present. I think the person who has the most disruption in all this is the faculty member. They have to really try and manage what's going on in the class and remember that they have not just an audience, but people that they're supposed to be engaging in and interacting with. So this was a challenge for the faculty, and I think it still is in some cases. So this is what a room looks like. We have some folks up in the cloud, and those are representing those people at home, or maybe not at home, but maybe in a dorm, because they didn't feel comfortable going to class from a safety perspective. And we also had plexiglass barriers in front of the faculty member, which is that weird square looking thing in the image that you see there. Our regular Hyflex rooms, really the only difference, it always had a display. The only real difference is that there was a camera on a tripod. And believe it or not, we deployed over 100 of those, and not one single one went missing from the fall semester. We'll see if we're that lucky in the spring. Here's just examples of the real equipment and an actual install, right? So a PTZ camera that's up here on the back wall. You have 4 ball mics hanging down from the ceiling that are capturing both the instructor and the audience. That was one of our big things, is to make sure that the students can engage with other students, not just the faculty member to the student, and that's worked out pretty well. The left picture here is a picture of our learning studio at our health sciences campus, and that had a whole bunch of technology in it already, but it didn't have a camera. So we added cameras. It was those kinds of classrooms are designed really not to have a front of the room, so we had to figure that out for the instructor as we went along. On the right is a lecture hall from our law school in Newark. Again, which had some display technology in it, but not the technology that we engaged in that would make for an engaging experience. This is what our typical panel looks like, and Matt's going to get into how these classes actually wind up on this panel. But the whole idea of doing a Teams room is that a faculty member walks in a classroom, and before they even touch anything with their laptop, they can click that join button, and both the in-person and the people that are remote and themselves are starting that classroom right away. So they have a little bit of that experience of the before class time, the asking questions before the faculty member gets in there. And then as the faculty member sets up their laptop, that's what enables them to share any content they might be sharing. So outside of the challenges around finances and logistics for getting things installed and training, there are obviously some other challenges that came to be. How do we get the data pushed to those panels? And of course, because we had two different types of rooms, there's two different sets of rules, two different ways of making some things happen. And a faculty member could be teaching in both. And in fact, most faculty members had to experience both types of rooms. So that was quite challenging. And there were different rules for rooms and classes that were assigned to rooms with a Teams panel in it. And then we had an additional challenge around cross-listed classes. And unbeknownst to me, I would think a cross-listed class might happen twice, but we've actually seen our use cases where there's 3 and 4. I don't think we quite went to 5 classes that were actually all just cross-listed and were one course. So setting that as the foundation of what our problem was, what our strategy was. I'll turn it over to Matt to talk about how we actually implemented all of this from the back end.
Excellent, Paul and Matt. There's 3 questions out there that you can come to at any point. I'm suspecting what people were intrigued by the wall panel to start your class with one button. Are you using a Crestron, and do you record the class sessions with Teams? And I suspect you may get into some of this, so we can take those later or address them in line. Thanks.
I'll do them real quick. Yes. So this is what the panel looks like when a faculty member walks in the room. And if all goes right with what Matt is going to describe in a few minutes, I am that teacher for Sociology 1201 Section AD, and I will just click the join button, and the panel, that's a Crestron panel. I can certainly give the model and the specs in the chat afterwards. But when the faculty member clicks that join button, the room system turns on, projector, the display, the mic, the speakers, and you immediately join the meeting as if it was you joining from your laptop. So why don't I turn it over to Matt, and he can sort of describe what happens in the back end to make all of those pieces function.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So yeah, the answer, of course, as to how we do this and what the methods are my favorite answer in IT, which is it depends, right? Which is always the answer, especially on the technical side. And this slide is entitled automation, right? Which is, again, the dirty little secret of automation is it might not be quite as automated as you expect everything to be. It certainly is in this case, and that's due to some limitations in the technology. And also, to be clear, we were pretty conservative in this, right? This is mission critical stuff. We need these classes to work. So we did not want to go overboard in a over-engineered, very high level design of how we could do things. We looked at simplicity, and I think it was the right call because this has worked through a full semester. We're in our second one now. So as has been discussed already a couple of times in this whole session, school data sync is the core of this. This is thanks going out to Microsoft as well for the use of Power Automate with School Data Sync, because now this is fully automated for us. So 4 times a day we do our updates for School Data Sync. They essentially create every course in the university across the 3 campuses, and that's our base to then do some additional automation and loads on top of that. On the next slide here, if we can jump. Yep. So the initial loads the first thing we have to do. So right at the start of the semester, one of the tough calls we have to make is how close do we load our data to the start of our semester? Because of course, if you do it too early, as we all know, there are a million last minute changes going through the registrar's office and other areas, scheduling and assignments and things like that. But you don't want to do it too close in case there are problems and we have a real issue on our hands. So that has been a balancing act for us. I think we do it about 4 or 5 days prior to the start of a semester, maybe a little more in this semester. But it's worked out in that it's close enough that there aren't a huge amount of changes, but we have to go through it. So the first day of these loads are the following things that we have on the screen here. It's the cross-listed course load. So as a separate extract from our ERP system, which happens to be Ellucian's Banner, we are taking data and we are loading it. We have written in-house via Python a script that connects to the Graph API and creates all these events, creates the cross-listed courses events. We have a standard naming convention for those cross-listed courses, and then we attach the students to them as part of the initial load. The same sort of thing happens with the Hyflex class, the calendar load. It's an initial feed, again, from our ERP system. Same sort of Python scripting, different scripts, but the same technology, same Graph API. And that creates our reoccurring calendar events. We add the instructors and we add the class groups from School Data Sync as the accounts for the attendees. So everything kind of rolls up in these initial loads. And that's fine for the initial loads. But as we all know, changes come in, and that's where things aren't so automatable, at least so far.
I just want to jump in there a second and make sure everybody understands the cross-listed dilemma, right? So a student might register for class A, another student class B, another student class C, and in reality, that's one instructor, one room, one day and time, right? But the way School Data Sync sees them is they are all 3 separate courses. So if we left it that way, then we would have 3 sets of students in 3 different meetings, and the instructor would only be in one. So that's essentially the cross-listed course problem.
Right. So then after the initial loads comes the daily, or many cases 4 times a day, updates that we have to do. And these, for the most part, are manual. Some aren't, but some are. And basically what we've got to do, the first updates are to the cross-listed courses, as Paul just referred to, and our scripts then manually create once a day. I believe it's 8 in the morning. We do a load. There aren't too many changes on the cross-listed courses side, and then we have an automated piece that then adds new students from the courses that are associated with the cross list as connected to it. So the cross-listed course is a piece of manual work and then an automated piece added on. Then the big one is really the Hyflex class calendar load, which is a 4 times a day load that system support in our IT organization ends up doing most of the updates for. And some of that is a manual process where we get emailed all of the changes in the day, and you basically add or change in 365, Office 365 as needed. What we found so far, and it's mainly good news, is our process, our loads and our manual processes haven't caused any issues. Nothing has broken, nothing has come, no bizarre outcomes based on what we do. The vast majority of problems, if not all of them, perhaps, are done by students that mean well, that have happened to create classes before we did and have conflicts on the time in some of the rooms, faculty that have either accidentally or thought they should rename classes and things like that. So we have a bit of a back and forth challenge with those loads after we do it initially. I think on the next slide, I have somewhat of an eye chart here that you may have to look at after the presentation, but this is basically just diagramming what I talk through here. And the top 20% of this is really the feed. Again, like I was saying before, the ERP database, our Ellucian Banner database, is the feed for all of this data. And the top process is the School Data Sync process via Power Automate. The middle pieces there are both the initial loads, again, the cross-listed course load and the initial Hyflex class calendar load. and then the updates to that in the bottom. So what's our challenge right now is the bottom piece here that's saying manual updates. We did start with temporary employees to help us out with this. We didn't get a good feel right away. It's just an unknown. How many changes were we going to face here? Were we going to be behind the 8 ball on changes required for classes? It turns out there weren't that many. It's certainly manageable. We have mercifully short ad drop period as well. So as we all know, things don't stop after ad drop, right? Plenty of changes go through the entire semester, but the bulk, the majority of it is the ad drop period, and that's where these manual changes happen. And as I'm speaking now, these are coming up, majority of them over this week and early next week, and then things should settle down somewhat. But we do have essentially a series of emails, as you can see in the bottom left corner here. Email comes with about 5 attachments in it with all of the things that could happen. Is it new classes? Is it new students? Renamed things? Instructor changes? Things like that. And those are best handled right now manually. One of our asks for Microsoft, and hopefully it is on the roadmap somewhere, is additional APIs for updates after the fact, right? We can do our initial loads, but changing and updates aren't quite there yet from what we found. Again, we tend to be a little conservative on that, so there may be some changes that we haven't looked through very recently, but we did look a little while ago, and there wasn't a significant amount of changes we could do to this process yet, but that's certainly in the future. So I think I got one more slide here with just our updates. The future items for us, obviously, we want to get rid of as many manual updates as we possibly can. Where the more we can get rid of, the more real time we can make this as the additional API endpoints are exposed. And then we'll look at doing direct database queries to our ERP system as opposed to getting flat files out of it, right? You can see in the diagram that I showed, it's kind of files out, email, review, and then send on for the manual pieces. And finally, again, additional Graph API enhancements. But this, when you look at the diagram, I think it actually looks a little more complicated than it really is. You know, for after getting your used to the process in a day, this is pretty much standard work for a small amount of people. 4 or 5 folks will jump on it a couple of times a day and make these updates. And again, like I said, the majority or even all of the updates are really just things that people have done accidentally in these classes. It's not bad loads or bad data at all. So that's the update on the automation
Awesome.
side.
We have lots of questions. So again, really appreciate you guys and the Seton Hall team sharing, right? Everybody has different questions, right? We're all in different places. And, you know, as you were speaking, there were a bunch of things that actually came up that I'm like, oh, there's this other school that's doing some things that, you know, I may connect you with some of our friends over at, I think over at Stony Brook. You know, they have some things around this area that I think might be worthwhile. So really appreciate kind of the innovation that you've done and the way that, you know, it sounded like a lot of this stuff you already had in place. You know, you might have repurposed some things, so you really got creative in terms of how you were doing and what you were spending and kind of getting all the pieces to work. And I love the fact that you have everything hooked into Banner with STS, and that would be another thing that I think I'll have a deeper discussion with you offline because there's a number of schools that are in various versions of purgatory sometimes as it relates to some of those systems. And I'm not going to judge. I used to actually work at Lucian for a number of years. So Stephanie or Heather, you want to take some of the questions? We have a couple of.
Yeah, I'll let Heather look through there. And I just wanted to add something too that I think is really poignant. First of all, and again, this isn't like another doctorate drop, but I am still faculty at the university level. And so from a perspective of working with many faculty who may not be comfortable with technology, I can tell you that the Teams Room environment is one that whether you're really dealing with higher ed or K-12 is something that's just much more seamless than, again, sort of the hook in, project, which screen am I on? Can they see me? Can they see my content? Like that combination is really off-putting to some who aren't as technologically advanced. The other thing that I will say is that I really like this sort of new approach. To me, first of all, everyone knows that funding is difficult, right? But we just got the report out from new CARES dollars / federal funding / relief packages that are hitting schools across the country, higher ed and K-12. If it's something that you're feeling is really cost prohibitive, I would say investigate it, because not all the time is that the case. Now, certainly if you're wanting to put a Surface Hub in like 50 to 100, rooms, sure, but there is a try before you buy. So if you want to try out a Surface Hub, you should definitely give that program a look, and get one for 30 days and play around with it. But be specific and strategic about how you use your funding. I think a lot of places don't disrupt their refresh cycles frequently, and now would be a time where you could justify sort of disrupting that a little bit. So thank you guys, this was really great, and I just want to visit campus. It looks beautiful, and it made me miss having a lot of people on campus hanging out.
And actually, I'm thinking, just based on the time and the fact that there are some great questions, would it be okay, Seton Hall team, if we were to kind of pool those questions and send them your way? And when you've got some time, maybe over the next week, send them back, those answers back to us?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no
Okay,
problem.
fantastic.
Absolutely.
That way we can try to get as many of those answered as possible, because I know once I hit the 5 o'clock hour, it's like witching hour for all 3 of my children, and you can just never tell what's going to happen over here. So
For the record, I've been yelling with my camera off for people to put pants on over here, because my school-age children are home now wrestling. So I can totally feel you on that. But thank you guys.
I'm in the office and Steve is down the hall, and I might have to yell about pants.
Right, same thing, right? Yeah. You
Thank
really
you
are
much.
our people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Seton Hall
Okay, no.
team, and Katie, and the MS Office Hours community. We'll have this posted in the next day or so, and we'll get the Seton Hall team the links as well. So appreciate it very much, and we'll see you next week.
thank you all.
Take
care.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.